are going to be going over how to graph data given to us in a table. It's a super important concept, but also one that is pretty simple to do. And it's going to be something that if you haven't already rocked it in math, that you're going to be rocking again and again and again. So let's go over it from a very simple standpoint. I'm going to be covering how to determine what the correct intervals should be, or the values that you should assign to each of these gaps right here on a graph in the X direction or horizontal direction, and in the vertical direction or the Y direction. So let's go over it. You're given the instructions to graph the following data. We're told that this is representing the distance that we've jogged. It's a very, very fascinating situation here. So we're told that we've got times that we've run for 0 seconds, 20 seconds, 40 seconds, 60, and 80. And then here we have gone a distance of 0, 30, 60, 90, and 120 meters. Okay, so what's the importance of these values? First, we need to determine on which axis we're going to put distance and time. Now, I've already written it here because I didn't want you to have to wait for me to draw something vertically. The distance will go on the vertical axis. The reason being is the vertical axis is often used for the variable or the data that depends on what goes on the horizontal axis. So what do I mean by depends on? Well, the distance that you will run completely depends on how much time you run for. So time is going to go on the horizontal axis, distance on the vertical axis. Another way of putting it is that the distance you run is a result of the amount of time that you've run for. Okay, so before we actually plot all of this data, we need to figure out intervals and also label the axes. So again, as I said, the horizontal axis is going to be time. So I'm going to title it time in seconds. I should also title my entire graph. And that we can even just say distance jogged. You can just copy the title that is given to you. Put it right here. Okay, so now from here, the rule of thumb is that you want your to have the best visibility in a graph. You want at most 6 to 10, somewhere in that range, intervals, meaning we want to take up at most 6 to 10 blocks. Anything more than 10 and it starts to get a little bit tedious or a little bit harder to read. So that's the best viewing window. So we're going to take the number that we have here, the total range is 0 from 80 in seconds, and divide that by a number between 6 and 10. So 0 to 80, if I divide 80 by 10, that's going to tell me how much each gap should be worth. So that's 8-second gaps. You could also do maybe 80 divided by 8, and that would be 10-second gaps. So I'm thinking I want 10-second gaps. That'll split it so that we have 8 intervals of 10. Perfect. So let's do it. So I'm going to just draw every 20. So that'll be 20, that'll be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And sure enough, we now have intervals of 10, and there are 8 blocks, each of which are worth 10. And then, of course, we start at 0 seconds. Now from there, we are going to figure out what the distances should be with the same idea. We've got a gap from 0 to 120. So let's say that we want intervals of, well, we could go divide that by 6. If we wanted 6 intervals, that'd be intervals of 20. That's not bad. We might want to consider doing that. Or we could do 120, and we could divide that by 10, and that would be intervals of 12. Personally, I like the intervals of 20. I think that's a little bit more of an even number, so let's do that. So we'll do 6 intervals. So this will be 20, then 40, 60, then 80, 100, then 120, and I'll do one more, 140, then 160. And notice I'm not putting numbers at every single column or every single row because I don't want to crowd the graph. All right, last but not least, now we just need to graph the data. That's it. So I'll do that in a different color here. So we're just going to plot these. Now these, for some of you, are going to be easier to understand if you write them as points. So that's the point 0, 0. This would be the point 20, 30. This would be the point 40, 60. So for some of you, this will be an easier way to graph things out. This will be the point 60, 90. And finally, the point 80, 120. For other people, you're going to be looking at what I just wrote here as gibberish. So the basic idea is we've decided that these numbers represent where we're going on a number line on the horizontal axis. And these values represent where we're going on the up-down or vertical axis. So I'm going to go left or right 0 and up or down 0, meaning I'm not going anywhere. And I'm going to plot that point. Here, this tells me to go to the right 20, right there, and then at the same time go up 30. So right 20, up 30, and we're getting an approximate here. It doesn't have to be a perfect graph. And then here we're going to go right 40 and then up 60. Right 40, up 60, and 60 is right about here. And then here we're going to go right 60 and then up 90. Right 60, up 90. Okay, so 90 is going to be, let's see, right about here, halfway between 80 and 100. And then 80 to the right, 120 up. 80 to the right, 120 up. It makes a pretty nice line right there. You're actually going to connect these dots. Let's see how straight I can make this line. Not too shabby. And we don't know how far this graph goes. It could keep going on. Maybe our jog doesn't stop here. Maybe it does stop there. You would connect the points because there is time in between 0 and 20 seconds. If you're jogging, there was a time somewhere in here where there were 10 seconds. And there was a certain distance that we were at 10 seconds. More on that in a later video. So the whole point here is to graph something out, you need to know how to break everything up into nice intervals. We use the rule of 6 to 10 blocks that we want to take up. And then it's just looking at these values as how far to the right we go on the horizontal axis, left and right. And then this column of numbers, how far we go up or down. All right, hopefully that was solid for you. This is all about graphing data so that we can show a story of what's going on, a visual story, so that the numbers kind of come alive. I've got a second video that I'll make down the road that you can watch that will go over these ideas, but with numbers that are not so nice, that don't graph so perfectly. I can't wait for you to watch that one. I hope this one was helpful.